And here comes Tartarian Tales 15, The Tartar King. And this is from a book that I rented on archive.org for a while and then pillaged it and found some good stories. And I'm going to share them rapid fire in the coming weeks. So they're short chapters, some of them. I guess this guy, Fernando Mendez Pinto, wrote a couple books, and they're pretty epics, and they just really tell the tales of his life because he had some serious adventures. This guy was unbelievable. And so I'm going to just rally off some of these stories here because he lived in a time that we want to know more about. And he definitely interacted with the Tartars and knew about everything. And he saw so many different cultures, so many different religions, spiritual paths, people. It went through so much trouble and hardship. It's just, you got to honor the guy. So here we go. The Tartar King. Tartarian Tales 15. From here, these four boys and Mitikur, who was guiding us, passed through a corridor belt on top of 26 bronze columns, by which we reached a large hall constructed of wood, like a warehouse that was crowded with noblemen, among them some foreigners, Moguls, Persians, Berdios, Kalaminhas, and Burmese from the Sornau, king of Siam. Passing straight on through this building where there was no delay for reasons of etiquette, we reached another called Tigahapau, which was also filled with another large crowd of people. However, these were all armed and standing in 5 lines that extended for the entire length of the building, and all of them were wearing gold-plated swords slung over their shoulders. Here they detained Mitikur a while as they asked him some questions in a highly ceremonious manner and administered an oath to him on the maces the 4 boys were carrying, which he swore on his knees, kissing the floor 3 times. After this, they let him pass through another door up ahead, and we came out on a large square courtyard like the cloister of a convent, in which stood 4 rows of bronze statues in human form that looked like savages, with maces and crowns also made of bronze, but completely covered in gold. These idols or giants, or whatever they were, stood 27 handspans tall and 6 across at the chest. Their features were quite ugly and forbidding, and their hair was coarse and unruly, like a Kafir's. When we asked the Tartars what those figures represented, they told us that they were the 360 gods, who created the days of the year in order that the people should pray to them daily to nurture the fruit that the earth produces on those days of the year, which gods the Tartar king had brought there from a great temple called Angikamoi, which he captured in the city of Xipatam, in the sanctuary of the tombs of the kings of China, for the purpose of displaying them in triumph when he returned to his country, so that it would be known throughout the world that in spite of the king of China, he had captured his gods. In the middle of the courtyard I am talking about, between an orange grove surrounded by a trellised fence of ivy, rosemary, and rose bushes, as well as many other kinds of shrubs and flowers that do not grow in Europe, there was a fantastic tent erected on 12 camphor-wood balusters, each of which was inserted into 4 rods of silver twisted like a friar's waist cord, thicker than a man's arm. Inside this tent there was a flat dais like an altar, covered on all sides with an extremely fine quality of gold leaf, with a canopy-like hood above it that was studded with many silver stars, the sun, the moon, and a few clouds, some white and others the color of rain clouds, all fashioned of enamel so skillfully and looking so natural that one's eyes could almost be deceived into thinking they had water in them. And everything else, both in proportion and the execution of the painting, was very perfect. In the center of the dais there was a large silver statue lying on a bed of silver that was called Abikau Nilankor, meaning God of the Health of Kings, which had also been taken from the temple of Angikamoi that I have mentioned before. Around the statue, in 2 rows, there were 34 idols the size of 5 or 6-year-old children, all on their knees with both arms upraised to it as though worshipping it. Right near the entrance to the tent there were 4 boys, perfect little gentlemen in their rich attire, who, in twosomes, were spreading incense all around it. At the sound of a bell that was struck at certain intervals, they would throw themselves face down on the ground, covering each other with incense and chanting aloud, Hiksapu Alitau Ksusabim Tami Tami Ora Pani Maguao, which means, May our cry ascend unto thee like a sweet fragrance, so that thou mayest hear us. Guarding this tent, a short distance away and encircling it all around, were 60 halberdiers, arrayed in dressed green leather with rich and well-wrought helmets on their heads, all of which together presented quite a beautiful spectacle of great majesty. Once beyond this courtyard, we entered another section of the compound, comprised of 4 beautiful and richly appointed buildings, in which there were many noblemen, both native and foreign. Continuing on from here, close on the heels of Middeker and the 4 boys, we came to the door of a large 1-story audience hall, built like a church, where 6 mace-bearers were stationed. After engaging in some other kind of ceremony with Middeker, they showed us all inside, without allowing anyone else to enter. The Tartar king was in this building, accompanied by many princes, lords, and captains, both native and foreign, among them the kings of Pasua, Makui, and Kempkenpet, Raja Banau the Anchisakatai, and some other kings, making 14 altogether, who, dressed in rich and festive costumes, were all sitting about 2 or 3 paces from the foot of the dais, and alongside it, a little further back, were 32 very beautiful women, playing different instruments and making music that was delightful to hear. The king himself was seated above, on top of the piambra, as they call the dais, surrounded by 12 children on their knees with their small gold maces, like scepters, resting on their shoulders. A little further back there was a very beautiful girl, very richly attired, who kept fanning him from time to time. She was the sister of Middeker, our general, and a favorite of the king, and it was through her that he had achieved such a high position and such great renown through the armed forces. The king must have been about 40 years old, lean and tall, a handsome man of stern and serious aspect, with a short beard, a Turkish-style mustache, and slightly slanted eyes. He was dressed in a purple kimono, somewhat like a surplice, embroidered with pearls, and on his feet he wore a pair of green sandals, worked with gold thread and garnished likewise with pearls, and on his head a helmet of purple satin, in its border all studded with rubies and diamonds. We stopped 10 or 12 paces in front of him and made our kowtows, kissing the ground 3 times, along with some other ritual courtesy the interpreters had showed us. The king then ordered the music to stop. "Ask these people from the end of the world," he directed Middeker, "if they have a king, what their country is called, and how far it is from there to where I am now in the land of the Chinese." Acting as spokesman for us, one of our party replied that our country was called Portugal, and that we had a king who was very great, rich, and powerful, and that it would take nearly 3 years to journey from there to the city of Peking, an answer which left him gasping with amazement, as though he could not conceive of the world being so large. Hitting his thigh smartly 3 times with a small rod he was holding, he turned his eyes upward to heaven, as though giving thanks to God, and said aloud for all to hear, Julie Kavau, Menai Dotario, Pismau, Himacor, Davo Quitaro, Sinapoko, Nifando Hoparau, Voxido, Voltanitrarau, Campanu, Foragrem, Hupuchide, Perponi Inque, which means, O Creator, Creator of all things, who among us, humble creatures that we are, crawling like ants on the face of the earth, can comprehend the marvels wrought by thee in thy grandeur. Fuxidani, Fuxicudans. Come closer, he said, beckoning to us to come up to the bottom step of the dais where the 14 kings were sitting, and asking us again as though he could not believe his ears, Pukau, meaning, how far, how far? We replied, as we did before, that it would take almost 3 years, to which he responded by asking why we did not come by land instead of exposing ourselves to the perils of the sea. Our answer was that the earth was too large and that there were kings of different nations who would not permit it. What is it that you are looking for in those other lands? Why do you expose yourself to such great hardships? After we had explained why, in the best and most felicitous terms that occurred to us at the moment, he remained silent for a while, then shook his head 3 or 4 times. The fact that these people journey so far from home to conquer territory, he remarked to an old man sitting nearby, indicates clearly that there must be very little justice and a great deal of greed among them. It would certainly seem so, the old man said, called Raja Banau, replied, for when men, by dint of industry and ingenuity, fly over all the waters in order to acquire possessions that God did not give them, it means either that there is such great poverty among them that it makes them completely forget their homeland, or that the vanity and blindness engendered in them by their greed are so great as to cause them to deny God and their fathers. Some of the men there, as we inferred, found this remark amusing and exchanged a few witty and courtly pleasantries about it, which the king enjoyed very much. Then the women began to play their instruments once more, and after a little while the king withdrew to another apartment, accompanied only by the women who were playing and the girl who was fanning him, without allowing any of the men to join him. Then one of the 12 boys who had been carrying the scepters approached Midikar with a message from his sister to the effect that the king had asked him not to leave, which he considered a very great honor since it had been delivered in front of all the kings and lords who were present in the hall. With that he stayed on there and sent us back to our tent, assuring us that he would take care to remind the Son of Heaven about us. Wow. Awesome. The Tartar King. Seems like a very interesting guy, and seems like maybe that's kind of a hint that maybe they didn't know the true size of the world, which is very interesting. But I love the description of all the things in there, the 32 women playing beautiful music, the attire of the king and all the diamonds and jewels and rubies everywhere. The fact that there are all these other kings and these travelers just like get to meet these 14 royalties. This king has no idea that the world is big at all. It seems like they're really convinced that their land is what it is, and that makes kind of sense considering that if you can't fly, it's tough to really tell how big everything really is or how small everything really is. And so maybe the history and the ancients who actually could fly, because I do believe that whether it's Egyptians or someone, they were capable of flying. I guess it wasn't during this guy's time. But a lot of the words, too, a lot of the things always remind me of Mayan South American language, the same style of letters. It's like actually shocking to me. So I'm wondering if there's a connection there. Who knows? And since that's the Tartar king speaking that language very amazingly, maybe the Tartars, since they were masters of the sea, ended up making it across the ocean to South America, making settlements and doing so much more. I have a feeling they all were interconnected, and we've been told more and more lies. Bless you all.